Hi there, this is Diane Samet, and today in this video I would like to show you how to make some braids inside Adobe Illustrator, vector braids. Let me show you where we're headed. We're headed here to this kind of look. I'm going to zoom in a little bit so that you can see where we're headed. And the reason that I want to show you how to do this is because it incorporates something called a pattern brush, which can make your life infinitely more enjoyable, less difficult when you're making vector elements if you can build them into brushes. I'm going to go into outline mode, which is Command Y on my Mac. So you can see the path itself is nothing more than an oval, nothing more than a straight path. The brush applied as the appearance to that path is what is creating the braid. And so, it takes a little time to build the brush, but then once the brush has been built, you can use it over and over and over again until you just get totally tired of it. And then, but it just saves so much time. Spend a little time at the beginning making the brush, and then you can go ahead and use it over and over again, which will save you a lot of time in the long run. So that's where we're headed. But to get there first, let me just back up a little bit. This is actually the second part, the second stage of this file. I'm going to go down to my layers panel. I have two layers here. I'm going to start at the beginning layer here, which is building the structure. In almost all my work, I build the structure first, and then I apply shading, colors, special effects, gradients, whatever you may want. But it's the structure, the underlying shaping, as I call it, that is so critical. Now, to review real quickly, how do you make a pattern brush? Any object inside Illustrator can be a pattern brush. So I just have some of these little starbursts. As a matter of fact, they might even be expanded symbols from the symbol panel if I remember correctly. So all I have to do is just simply drag this into the brush panel and drop it there, and go ahead and select pattern brush as my option. And any object can become a pattern brush as long as it does not contain a linear or radial gradient. You're fine. So go ahead and hit make a pattern brush, and you get the pattern brush options. And what you're seeing here in this enormous dialog box, one of the bigger ones inside Illustrator, is that a pattern, which is a tile system, actually has a straight edge, as you can see me hovering over it, and then it has an outside corner and inside corner. It has the beginning of the path and the end of the path. So there's 5 different portions here. See, this one says outer corner, side tile, which means the straight edge, straights. Then we have the inner corner, which there's nothing there. Again, the red diagonal means nothing, so there's nothing assigned to the inner corner. And there's nothing assigned to the start tile or the end tile either in this particular pattern brush. I'll go ahead and give it a name, and we'll call it, I don't know, stars. And we'll set the colorization to tints so that anything that is gray or black is going to be retinted, so whatever the stroke color will be. And I'll hit OK. And now I'm looking over at my brush panel, and there is my new brush. I'll go ahead and make a shape, and we'll go ahead and apply it. We'll apply it and give it a color. I just noticed that my stroke color was white, so you couldn't see it, but you can see now it's red because I just changed it. I can change it to green, purple, blue, whatever color my stroke color is. That's the color that it will be. I'm going to deselect for a moment. I'm going to come back over and, oops, deselect, Shift Command A. Come on. Oh, there we go. There we go. Now I'm going to do my, I want you to see how this tile system actually works. So I'm going to click on the brush and drag it out onto the workspace. I make sure nothing is selected, because if something was selected by dragging it out, I'm actually going to apply it to the path, and I don't want to do that. I just want to see how this is built. Now, that doesn't look any different here in preview mode, but if I go into outline mode, again, I'm going to hit Command Y to go into outline mode, you'll see that Illustrator added this little square tile around the outside edge. Now, this one that I just moved, that was the tile for the straight edge, and then this one, you can see how it's cut into diamonds or triangles. This one is the corner And Illustrator added these little tile pieces automatically, and that's how Illustrator knows exactly where to position these objects that you have created on the actual path. So I'm going to hit Command Y one more time. But that's the basic idea of a brush, so a pattern brush. And so easy. You can make almost anything into a pattern brush. So, this one now is a little bit more complicated. All right, now, complicated. Remember, it's a tile system. So I have to figure out the shapes for the braid, and then I have to figure out where they have to stop and start to make a seamless tiling so that to the human eye, we can't see where one braid stops and another, or one tile stops and another tile starts. I have to use reference for this, so I found this picture of a braid, and I start to analyze it first by its basic shaping. I like to stylize everything. I don't like too much literal photographic realism. I figure if that's what you want, you'd be great as a photographer. I'm not a photographer. I'm an illustrator. So I want to create just the basic shape. So I look at each section of the braid and I try to simplify that shape. And as you can see, I've simplified them into these basic shapes right here. A braid has 3 twists, so there were actually 3 strands of hair coming around. So if I hover on this area right here, then it moved under a section, then came on top of a section, then it went under a section, and then went on top of a section. And actually, I will tell you, this is probably the hardest part right now, is just figuring this out. If I had somebody with long hair and I could braid it, that might have helped, but I didn't. So I had to use this particular photograph to help me figure this all out. So again, as I said, the structure is critical. So as I built the structure, you can see there's the basic pieces. And I aligned them so that they were nice and straight on top of each other. Let me just hit undo, 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 so they're back where they came from. Going into outline mode helps to do that a lot. And then again, I got totally visually confused in the process of doing this. I noticed that if I color coded it or value coded it, it made it a whole lot easier. So the middle gray, this one, is going under the dark gray. Then it goes on top of the light gray, and then it goes under the dark gray, and then it goes over the light gray, and then it goes under the dark gray. All right, and I can do the same thing. The light gray goes under the medium gray, then goes over the dark gray, then goes under the medium gray, then goes over the dark gray, and so on and so forth. And as I said, color coding it in the process of making the structure helps a lot. All right, so if I were to take this shape and move it into the brush panel right now, let me go ahead and I think I mentioned this in an earlier video, but I have a tendency to always work horizontally when I'm building my brushes. So if I take this shape, it's not going to line up correctly. It's not going to line up seamlessly. Matter of fact, I'll just throw it in here and we'll just say make a pattern brush. I'll hit OK. And I'm not going to make any changes, but actually you can actually see the problem right now here in the preview. But we'll go ahead and make it so that you can clearly see what the problem is. Let me apply this to the edge. You can see I have this huge gap, and it's also stretching, by the way. That's partly because I have stretched to fit. Again, I double-clicked on or double-tapped on the brush itself to pull up its options, and I have stretched to fit, which is your typical option, and that's what's happening here in the center. If I were to lower the stroke weight down, it would make more sense. It looks a little bit better, but you can still see there is this huge gap between each of the sections. And the gap is happening because, I'll use my line segment tool just to show you. Here's the end of one side, and then here is the end of the other side. And so Illustrator is actually repeating from where I just drew those 2 lines. So you can see these huge amounts of negative gaps or negative spaces. They're actually incorporated into the brush. I don't want that. I want to make sure that we have a seamless overlap or a seamless tiling. So I have to figure out where the tile needs to stop. on the left and the right hand side. And so I'm just going to get my line segment tool out one more time. And I'm going to go into outline mode. Again, Command Y does that. Maybe I'll just zoom in a little bit first too. Oops, let me get the zoom tool. And then I'll get the line segment tool. I'm going to cut this design right here where I'm hovering. And so I want to get right on that little piece right there and draw a nice line segment. I'm going to hold down Shift to keep it straight and Alt Option to pull from the center. So I've got a line. I'll go back into outline mode. If you want to make sure, absolutely sure, that this line is touching the corner of that piece right there, then select both of them. Go get your alignment panel. I just happen to have it up already. I'm going to select the shaping one more time. You get that heavy blue outline. That means that's a key object. And then I'm going to say 0 inches it down in distribute spacing, and we'll distribute it vertically. Okay, and that will have moved, oops, I'm sorry, do it again. Okay, Illustrator. There we go. I said 0 inches. That was a mistake on my part. Please forgive me. I want to align it to the left edge. And I may not have seen anything move, or I may have seen it move a little bit, but I want precision here. You have to have precision or else you'll see a gap. You want to make sure that as you move in, that line is right there on the corner. Let me do the other side, since that one was not so flawless in my presentation. But first, let me go back into preview mode. I hit Command Y one more time. So what I need to, where does the second line go? All right, I'm going to cut it here. But how do I know where to put the second vertical line? You know where to put the second vertical line because whatever starts heading out, so for example, this piece right here, we see the little triangle shape, and then we have the remaining part of that lock, or that part of the braid, heading out this way. Well, I'm looking for the same pattern on this side, and I can see it's right here, and I probably have to pull the line up right where I'm hovering over right now. You can do the same thing at the bottom. You see you have the larger section of the light gray is on the inside of the repeat, and then I have the side on the outside. So again, it's going to be right along this edge, right where that anchor point is. So I'm going to go back and get my line segment tool. Click, hold down Shift to keep it straight, hold down Alt Option to pull from the center, and that's where the second cut will come, so that whatever exits out the left side of the tile is coming in on the right side of the tile. And the same thing is true with the lighter gray. Whatever exits out the left side of the tile is coming in on the right side of the tile. All right, so again, I want to make sure that this new line is right there on that corner. That's very critical. So I select the line, hold down the Shift key, and select the other group of 2 shapes. I want to make sure they're right there next to each other. I will select that group of shapes one more time to make them the key object, and then I will align it to their left edge. Just to make sure, again, as I go into outline mode and zoom in, that line cut is right there where it belongs. Back into preview mode. And that's how you know where to cut. On the next artboard, you can see that I had already done that. I already had it marked exactly where I need to cut it. And then what we want to do is do that cut. Now here's a little anomaly inside Illustrator. Normally in Illustrator, you select everything, and like for example, I would assume I would select all this and say cut below or something to that effect. This time, don't select everything. Just select the one path, leave the objects below unselected, go to Object, Path, Divide Objects Below. Okay, and then I can go ahead and get rid of this one. I'm going to hit delete and delete. I'll do the same thing for the other one. Again, select the path, not the objects below. Do Object, Path, Divide Objects Below. And then we can go ahead and remove these extra pieces that we don't need. All right, so there we have the perfect cut. Now we don't want the stroke on it anymore, so let me go ahead and remove that stroke. I'll make it none. And that's going to be our perfect repeat, because what stops here is coming in on this side. What stops here is coming in on that side. Now we'll go ahead and take this and we will drag it into the brush panel. Say make a pattern brush, hit OK. And you can see in the preview that it all looks pretty good, pretty good. If you want to be able to recolor it, you want to make sure you say tints, and we'll say this is my braid 1. And there it is. And you always test it out. Make sure once you've done that, you've tested it out. So we'll create a shape. We'll get us a nice little ellipse going here. And apply it. And there you go. You've got yourself a nice little twisty braid. Automatically, you can use it over and over and over and over again. And if you wanted to, you can go ahead and change the stroke weight. And I think I've mentioned this before in the past. If you want to use this as a series of shapes, I forgot to recolor it. Let me recolor it so I can show you that you can recolor it. There you go. If you want to use this as a series of shapes, then you go ahead and select your object and say expand appearance, and now you actually do have shapes. Now we do have a little few cut lines here, and if I use Pathfinder, I can use merge, and it didn't pick it up exactly. I mean, it did pretty well, but you know, if I have a little problem here, I might use Shape Builder and just unite those two together. And of course, Shape Builder just picked up the color that was in my fill swatch. So if I want to make sure that I have the right color for my fill swatch, then I probably should have saved a color inside my swatch panel, which I don't think I did. I'm just double checking. Let's see. We will save it now. Okay. So now I've got that green saved in my swatch panel. I'll go get my Shape Builder tool, and now I can drag across, and it unites it. And it makes it nice and seamless there. And I can go ahead and do this one as well. And then I would have to save the lighter green to do that one. And we'll just fix all those little issues right there. That one doesn't seem to want to go. We can always use unite on that one. I'm going to have to take a look and see what the issue is. What's going on here? It doesn't seem to want to fix itself. It's always interesting when you're doing a demo and things don't always work exactly as you had planned. Why these two are not uniting, I'm not exactly sure. Seems to be a tiny little gap. I'd have to go into outline mode and really, oh wow, really figure that one out. Why is there a gap? Curious. This is not part of our demo. Doesn't seem to want to go. Being stubborn today. I don't know if it would actually cause a huge problem in the printing of this. We'd have to double check later on and see. I'm going to move ahead though to go ahead and finish with the demo. I do want to go back into outline mode just to show you the difference between what we have going on here. You can see, remember, this one has the brush applied to it, and now this one is the series of shapes that was expanded. And so this is all great, but if you go back to the photograph, you'll notice that if you're actually doing a braid, you can't rely on having different colors or different values like this to differentiate between the different hair segments. So how do you really know when one piece of the hair goes under and which one goes over? It's because of the shadows. So as it goes under, as one piece of hair goes under another, you can see that there's a shadow there. And therefore, we need to add shadows. Okay, if we assume, for example, that this is all one color, I'm going to get my eyedropper tool, make it all one color, and there are no shadows, then you really can't tell what's going over and what's going under. And that's the problem that I ran into. I had to make sure that I could see the braiding effect, you know, the braid actually going over and under and over and under when the actual structural color stayed consistent. So that's where we're going to head on to the next layer. So I'm going to open up my other layer. And show you how I solved the problem. Again, let's go back to where we actually have the finished piece. There are no gradients in it. Remember I said you can't put gradients in a brush. So with that knowledge, I'm like, oh, darn, really would wish we could use a gradient because a gradient would be awesome. But I knew that I couldn't use a gradient, so I had to figure out another way to build that illusion of shadow. And I reached back into art history and I remembered engravings and how do engravings look and create that shadow effect. And so that's where I came up with this little process right here. So again, here's our structure. I got the structure and I put the stroke back on here so that we can just see where each of the different pieces would go. And I need to build a series of line works that will create the illusion of a shadow. So you can see this is just a copy of one of these pieces. And what I have done is I have cut, you can see what I'm doing is I'm cutting the corners here. I'm going to get rid of this piece and we don't need a fill on this anymore. So I basically have two lines. It's a group. Let me ungroup it so you can see. See that now we have these lines. And of course they line up perfectly with the original shape. What I need to do now is create a blend between the two lines. So I'm going to select both lines. I'm going to go to Object, Blend Options, and I'll say a specified step blend so I get a whole bunch of lines. And I think there are 15. Is that right? "15 steps. I'm going to hit OK, and then I'll do Object, Blend, Make. All right, so this one's much heavier than the example because the stroke weight's a little bit heavier. If I lower the stroke weight, where's my stroke panel? I'm going to lower it down to like 5 points. Now you can see that it's a little bit more like what we had here. Going back into outline mode so that you can see that the blend steps are just an appearance, but I need to make them into actual paths. So I'm going to expand the blend. I'll go Object, Blend, Expand. Again, going into outline mode, now you can see that they are actual paths themselves. All right, so that's the actual line work. Give us kind of the illusion of strands of hair when we put it back on top. But now, oops, what about the actual little pieces that create the shadow? That's actually easily done too. I'm going to select my expanded blend. I'm going to hit copy, so I'm hitting Command C. If it's on a PC, it'd be Control C. And then I'm going to hit paste in front. So it's going to take the object on my clipboard and put it directly on top of the original object. It's under Edit, Paste in Front, but I use the keystroke command usually, Command F. So I'm going to hit Command F. And so now I have two copies. So I'm going to move one aside just so you can see it. I'll put it back. And when it comes in and becomes the object on top, when you paste in front, then the top object is selected, the bottom object is not. I don't know if you noticed that as I pulled it aside. Notice the bottom object is not selected, just the top object that you just pasted back is selected. And so now I can go ahead and trim these lines so they create a nice little arc. I'm going to use my eraser tool for that. So I go back over to the tool panel, grab my eraser tool. And if you want to make it larger or smaller, I'm going to use the left and right bracket keys. Holding down the right bracket key on the keyboard makes it bigger. Holding down or tapping the left bracket key makes it smaller. And I'm just going to erase that many. So you can see now that I have, you can see the end points, the anchor points. And if I increase that stroke weight up to maybe, let's see, maybe 2 points, you can see there you go. I have that set of paths. Oops. Come on. There we go. And they're separate from each other. I lowered the opacity. Let's see. What opacity was this? Maybe 50%. Now, while you can't have a gradient, which you can't in a brush, you can have lowered opacity. So I lowered the opacity to about 50. And then to get the subtle transition, so it looks less like a choppiness, looks more like a thin line that is got a bell bottom on it, so to speak. I have to select these little objects, the ones that were trimmed, and I'm going to apply a variable width profile. So I'm going to go to the stroke panel, and I hope you guys notice that I go from the control panel to the panels on the right. Just depends on where I am. I'm going to use width profile number 4, and I want to flip it. And you can see that it works for every single one of them except for this last one, this last outside one. So let me use my group select tool and just get him and flip him back. There we go. And now if I zoom in a little bit, you can see what we have, this kind of look. It looks like the line is getting a little thicker and it has kind of a little bell bottom edge to it. I'm going to group both of those two objects. I hit Command G to do that, or it would have been Control G on a PC. Right, so now I've got this, and now I need to apply it to each of my sections here. I'm going to do these one at a time so that they are perfectly aligned. I select this, hold down Shift. Matter of fact, I'm going to ungroup these now that I see that they are grouped. Right. So I've got those two. I'm going to select this one again so that it becomes the key object. That also means it won't move, but that my line work will move in alignment to it. So I'm going to say center it and center it. So it's right on top. I need to make a copy. Oops, didn't make a copy. Held down the wrong key. Did it again. Once again that I have this one, let's see, this is, you see that's a group of 2. That's what I'm ungrouping them, just to make sure. So I have the line work and the little piece selected. I will go reselect that little piece so it becomes a key object, and then I'll say horizontal and vertical alignment. I'm going to hit ungroup on all of these. It shifted a little bit on me. I had to do a couple undos. So Shift Command G is ungroup. Shift Command G. Shift Command G. Then of course I would have to reflect them and do the other side as well, and then get rid of the stroke. Ultimately you end up with something that looks similar to this. I played with the transparencies and the back color a little bit. And once again I have the lines drawn as before, so I know exactly where to cut them. But I can't cut these. If I cut these, then the line work is going to be all messed up. It's never going to be seamless. And so I'm going to use a different technique on this one. I do know where I want to put the lines or where they need to cut, but Illustrator is smart enough to know that if there is an invisible rectangle behind a shape, it knows to use that invisible rectangle as the tile in a pattern brush. Remember when I did the daisy kind of flower thing and I showed that it had a tile attached to it, that Illustrator automatically gave it a tile? That's because I didn't tell Illustrator what to use as a tile, so Illustrator used the entire object as the tile. I'm going to give Illustrator a tile. So there's a tile, but I need to make it invisible. So I'm going to make it filled with none, stroke of none, and it has to be behind, so make sure it's object arrange, send to back. Now if I use this behind my object, Illustrator will automatically know that whatever is inside that particular invisible rectangle is going to be tiled. Okay, so we just need to make sure that it's perfectly aligned. First thing I want to do is center my object. So let me move back out again. I wasn't sure if I had grouped all this or not. Now I'm going to make sure everything is grouped. I'm going to hit Command G, make sure everything is grouped. All right, we have this little square, a little rectangle. Now to my eye it looks pretty close, but it has to be really exact. So I'm going to select the rectangle and the line. Click on the line one more time to make it the key object. So it won't move, the rectangle will, and I'm going to say align to left edge. Now the left edges are perfectly aligned. And there we go. I think that one's perfect as well. I could double check by doing the same thing. I can go ahead and make sure it is selected a second time, and this time of course say align right edge. Not only that, I want to make sure the braid is centered. That way it'll be centered on this path that I build. So I'm going to select everything. Make sure that the braid doesn't move. I want the rectangle to move. Oops. There we go. And we'll center it. Going back into preview mode, we can get rid of these lines now. We don't need that one. We don't need that one. Okay, so you see there we have our brush object profile, so to speak, ready to go. Now when I drag this into the brush panel, Illustrator will automatically know to make it a pattern brush. Well, it will when I tell it, I'm sorry, it won't automatically know to make it a pattern brush. What it will automatically know to do is to take this rectangle that's in the back and use that for the tile. Drag it in, pattern brush, okay. You can see it's doing pretty well here. We like this. I like what I'm seeing here. We'll call this braid 2. Colorization set to tint. And I think that's it. We'll go ahead and hit OK. If it wasn't it wouldn't be a big deal. I'll just go ahead and make changes to it later if I needed to. And then we'll test it. We'll go ahead and draw a nice ellipse over here to the side. See how it looks. Sweet. Very nice. Very, very nice. And of course I can always change this weight, make it a tighter little braid. And we can zoom in. And then once again, if you wanted to, you could expand it and play with the colors. Although, since I made colorization set to tints, I can go ahead and recolor this the color of the stroke. I think that's it. And if you want to, you can go ahead and remember that you can always email me. Always go to my website, email me through there as well. Or you can find me on Facebook, you can find me on Twitter, you can find me on LinkedIn, Behance, all kinds of different places. If you have any problems making a braid, let me know. And maybe by then I will have figured out the other problem that I had with the merging of those shapes. Until next time, enjoy.